feel the healing. See, everything would be fine were it not for one activist group hell-bent on dividing us. The Sam Squad has more.
You know, this Black Lives Matter movement, I just don't think it's helpful to the country.
I believe that any group that distinguishes people by their race is by definition a racist group.
We need to stop labeling everybody Black lives, cop lives.
How many times have you been pulled over by a cop?
I feel like they use Black Lives Matter almost as a chant to taunt.
Is there any way for Black people to say they matter, they're awesome, they love themselves, that wouldn't upset white people?
You know, I don't think that white people go around and say that I love white people. I mean, it's okay to be proud of your heritage. I mean,
if you want to say that right now, I would be in support of that. If you wanted to yell, I love white people, this is the place.
But there was one thing they were willing to yell.
Can you say Black Lives Matter?
All lives matter.
All lives matter.
All lives matter.
Could you say just Black Lives Matter, end of sentence?
All lives matter.
Oh, so close.
All lives matter.
Yeah.
The people in Nice, France,
Absolutely.
their lives matter. I mean, all lives matter.
And Black Lives Matter.
Absolutely, all lives matter.
Do Black Lives Matter?
All lives matter.
I totally knew that. Yeah. This is the weirdest thing. Just pick a number between 1 and 10. 7.
There's just one problem with putting white people in charge of the conversation about race.
What do you think Black Lives Matter wants? What are they asking for?
I wouldn't have a clue.
It seems most white people know f*** all about the movement they're so upset about.
Do you think Black Lives Matter wants to not have law enforcement?
I don't know what their purpose is.
I don't know what they're saying. I just know there's a lot of anger there.
they need to make sure they're upfront and outright discrediting and condemn the violence.
So they've done that. What's next?
You know, I think they got to change the name.
Well, I don't think they're saying only Black Lives Matter.
I do. I 100%.
Because Black Lives Matter is an evil organization.
It's bordering on domestic terrorism, in my view.
It has no more place in our body politic than the KKK or the skinheads.
Give it up one more time because we love this show. Thanks so much for being here, guys, and thank you for doing, I don't believe in God, but what I will call God's work for us right now. It's wonderfully cathartic to watch the show every week, as well as informative. Let's start with that piece right there. What was it like talking to conservatives, these kinds of conservatives, I would say, about Black Lives Matter? And did they know you were from Full Frontal and have any idea what Full Frontal was?
Was it hard for you guys emotionally?
I feel like you should go first.
Well, they did. At that point, the show was kind of new, so a lot of people didn't know what Full Frontal was. But I feel like we have very different experiences because people see me coming and they're like, Hillary supporter. Like,
And they see me coming and they're like, oh, she's from Fox News. Okay, we can trust her. I'm like, I'm not.
What do they think when they see you?
Jew. No, in general, we spend a lot of time going to different conventions and rallies and this and that. And in general, people are very welcoming and open and they want to talk about stuff, and people are generally nice. Sometimes we talk to people who are really awful. Sometimes we talk to people who are just so out there that we don't even use it because it seems like we're beating up on someone who doesn't deserve to be beaten up. But, in general, you meet a lot of people where you're like, I like you. Why do you think that? Yeah.
So incredibly nice people with disastrous opinions a lot of the time.
I think also, I think opinions often where you think, oh, you want this so bad. You see this one thing, but you're the person who's going to get hurt the worst by what you think is.
This election in many ways has been called the sort of greatest election of confirmation bias we've ever seen, where so often people have an intrinsic belief, no matter what fact you present them, they're going to sort of rework that fact to represent or confirm their already inappropriate belief that they may have. How often do you find that when you're interviewing people at these conventions, where you could present them with a fact that totally is contrary to everything that they believe, and they will immediately spin that fact to help themselves?
It's interesting. In this piece in particular, not as much as you would think. Like, I talked to maybe one or two people who were just straight up terrible people. The majority of people I talked to at the beginning of the conversation, it was All Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization. In 5 minutes, it was, oh, you know what? I will Google that. I didn't know that. Like, and maybe it's because it's me and I'm maybe the first Black person they've ever gotten to talk to. But
he was really nice.
Yeah,
he was very nice.
Literally, it was that. Like the majority of people I left hugged me on the way out. They kept saying hi to me for the rest of the week at the convention. Like it's a big moment in their life to meet a Black person. So it's less that they like want to have that bias confirmed. It's that the only information that's been offered to them is that. So why wouldn't you believe it? Someone said it on the news. It must be true. And they met a complete stranger with a camera and were willing to listen to me. So less so when it comes to, like, when we were at the inauguration, there wasn't as much of that. People were, like, there to celebrate, and Trump is great, and they didn't want to...
glowed on.
But they were still very nice. They were like, we're sorry you're scared. We hope things turn out good, but I'm sure this is going to be good. And you'd be like, well, what about, like, do you think the wall is a great idea? Actually, I'm not that big on that, but I think everything's going to be great. And like every individual issue you'd ask them, they had a nuanced opinion about it, but their default position was everything's going to be great, he's going to be great.
Their nuanced opinion so often, without sort of barreling into Trump and his supporters too much, their nuanced opinion so often is that everything that was crazy that he may have said is kind of like, he's not really going to do all of that, but I do believe in immigration reform of some kind, and we should have maybe stronger immigration laws in this country, but a wall is ridiculous. It was just a
They weren't going to take him literally.
Right.
Yeah.
But then we formed ICE, or a
That's
new
right.
version of ICE that is just terrorizing this country right now. How do you guys go about pitching your pieces? 'Cause quite often it's the three of you that are going around as correspondents, and the piece is made up entirely of like the three of you doing stuff. But there have been specific segments that have been only you. There was you at CPAC recently. There was the one of you, talking to former African American activists, right? And then there was you in.
They're not African American anymore?
Oh, excuse me.
Okay, no.
Former activists?
They're also still activists.
Right, okay.
Activists of some kind.
Activists, yeah.
Talking to the about gun control. How did you guys go about pitching those, and how did it come about that you would be the sole sort of person taking on this subject?
I think, everything is...
Got lost on that one.
That's right.
Sorry.
That's okay. So the show is very much a team effort, and everyone is constantly pitching ideas and refining people's ideas, and there's some pieces that are just sort of call to a certain correspondent. It makes sense that they're the person to do it. The reason, without Ashley in the Black Lives Matter piece, that's a very different piece, so there's, sometimes it's also just like, who's busy, who can do this, whose idea was this, yeah.
It's also finding a way into the idea. Like, for instance, the safe guns piece. I have never shot a gun before, nor did I have any desire to shoot a gun. So when they came to me and they said, Allana, we have a perfect piece for you. It's going to be about guns, and you're going to go to a gun range. And so immediately I kind of go, oh my gosh, I don't know if I really want to do that. And then I have to dig a little bit more into the story and find what's the thing that I can kind of, hang my hat on. Oh, this woman has created some legislation that actually has prevented safer guns from getting on the market, and she's actually a Democrat. So it's sort of an interesting way into something where you kind of have to get, I'm going to have to get over this. I'm going to have to shoot a gun. I was a very good shot, just to let you know. I will never do it again.
You didn't enjoy it?
It was funny because there was this man who came up to me afterward. Okay, I did. It was thrilling.
Nobody doesn't enjoy shooting a gun. It's a rarity that someone gets up and shoots a gun at a target and it's like, they're like, that was kind of fun, I get it.
Well,
it
was thrilling, but terrifying. Like, there was people, I was at a range and there was a whole bunch of people next to me also shooting guns, and I'm Canadian, I couldn't get it out of my head that someone could just turn and shoot me. And so this man came up to me afterwards, and he was in his 70s, and he said, it's just so lovely to see a young woman like yourself so excited about guns. So is this something you're going to keep up? And I said, I will never.
And you shot him.
I might as well have shot him, because I said to him I was going to stick to bowling. And I just saw all the blood drain out of his face. He was so disappointed. But, so my point, you find a way into the piece. You kind of, try something new. And that actually is what makes it exciting.
I grew up on gun ranges, and whenever one of the wives or like a woman would come onto the gun range, all the men would rally around her and be super supportive, and the husband would be extremely proud, you know? He'd be like, here we go, honey. Like, look out and be so excited to watch her shoot, and she would usually be like,
I was the only woman there. It was kind of like, oh, look at her. And then they saw a camera, and like, she's only here for a television show.
Wait, were you like a feral gun range child? How did that?
I'm going to gun range,
okay.
not on a gun range. So they kept me in the shack in the back.
Let him out for some daylight.
So how did you guys start working on Full Frontal? I know you covered your story. You wrote about how you got involved with Full Frontal.
Sure. I did an interview. I didn't write it. Yeah, I had posted on Facebook, like, where are women missing out on getting these comedy jobs? And there was a long conversation that ensued, and some of the men were like, obviously you're just not as funny. And I was like, I don't know that to be true because I haven't had a chance to apply. Like, the only way to know if I'm as funny as someone else is to us both write a packet and read them blind and see which one is better. And so a friend of mine had been invited to submit to the show, and he was like, you're absolutely right. Put your money where your mouth is. Here's the packet. But because I hadn't officially been invited, I got it like 3 days before it was due, and I just spent like 3 days watching Daily Show clips to like try to get Samantha's voice in my head, and like falling asleep to Samantha every night for 3 days and writing my packet.
And then you finally saw her and went, ah!
Well, I felt like that weird thing where you're like, I know you very well. I have seen every interview you've ever done. And like Joe Miller, our showrunner, I think in her life has done 3 interviews, and I've seen all of them. Like, we were combing, one of my really good friends was also applying. We were like combing the depths of the interview to find any information about Joe Miller to like try to write towards what she wants.
Allana?
Sam and I did comedy together in Canada. We were in a sketch troupe called the Atomic Fireballs. And we performed in, dirty comedy clubs for pad thai and beer tickets. It was very glamorous. But we did years and years and years of that, which was amazing because we got to figure out our voices as comedians. And when you're an actor and you're a comedian, you have to create your own work. There's no one waiting to give you a job, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s when you're in a 4-woman sketch troupe. So what was wonderful about that, it was just, it really just kept us working. And then we've always kind of continued working together. And then when Full Frontal was picked up, she said, you're obviously moving to the United States of America. And I was so excited.
Welcome, a great time
Thank
to join
you.
us.
Oh, I couldn't wait for to be in the country with the first female president. And then everything changed and became very dark. But it's a wonderful place to work, and it's a great place to. It's the same sort of work that we were doing when we were the Fireballs. You're still creating the work. You're still working really fast, and I'm still a lady.
Mike?
I have to say that one of the worst things about working at Samantha Bee, talking about like the women, like women aren't funny, is that every woman who works there, even the women who aren't, like the women who work in accounting who aren't supposed to be funny, are funnier than me.
So it's really competitive for you.
Oh, this is awful. I worked with Samantha, I was a producer at The Daily Show a long time ago. And then did other things, including working at this place called AOL for a while.
Mike was a lot of people's boss here.
Oh. I love
We're going
you
to
all.
talk afterwards.
Right.
That's why they're laughing at your jokes.
Right, exactly. I've paid them all.
You don't have to do that anymore, guys.
It's okay.
We've been
right,
free
I can't
for a while.
fire you. But then when Sam was launched her show, we started talking and that she was going to launch this thing, and she said, "Hey, come do this," and I said yes, and that's how I got drawn in.
What do you guys think about the people are saying Donald Trump as president is a gift for comedy?
That's the worst thing.
Awful.
Not being able to sleep is not a gift to comedy. I promise I'm funnier when I'm well rested and not afraid for my friends' lives.
Those people should not give gifts.
Yeah. It's awful.
Yeah, it's real. The other thing is that you have like this monoculture. It's like all you're doing is talking about that, and this stuff changes so quickly. And if you're trying to do a field piece, which takes a few weeks of preparation, you do it. By the time, sometimes it's such a moving target that by the time you're like, let's talk about this, by the time it's supposed to air, this has morphed into something else that's worse or completely different.
There's no evergreen issues, it feels like.
No.
Well, I mean, there are, but we can't talk about them.
Yeah, they get drowned out.
We will often be pitching, something that's very evergreen that is an important thing, and we're working on it, and then the Muslim ban comes. Well, are you going to still do your piece about a hospital mistreating someone when there's a Muslim ban going on? That's not any less important, but nobody wants to hear about it this week.
So he's completely drowning out a lot of much larger issues, much more important issues, or other issues.
Other issues. I also think, like, Allana just had this very funny piece about this gun legislation where we're making fun of this woman who's a Democrat, and I think we like to make fun of Democrats. We want more opportunities to make that we're not always like, oh, it's just completely partisan, it's partisan, but it feels like that the Trump stuff just kind of overwhelms everything.
Yeah, it's also like different kinds of writing. Like we have some of the smartest, funniest people on our staff who could make jokes about the tiniest aspect of a bill, but we don't get to do that because we have to talk about there's just a huge issue every week. And you're like almost missing out on this whole other kind of comedy that we would have had if Hillary was president, where we would have been making fun of these little minute nuances. And
he's like that one member of the family that just absorbs everybody's oxygen. You know what I mean? Every Christmas you have to focus on that one member of the family because they're going to destroy Christmas. This is who our president is.
What are your guys' Twitter mentions like? Since you're in public and you're fairly on the left wing side of politics, and you're also making fun of the right. Not all the time, but you are. What are your Twitter ads like at this point?
I don't get any of that. I really don't. I think that I don't know why it is, but I don't get any right-wing. One of the funny things that happens is when I do a piece, and then once it gets out into the world, and people are watching it who aren't familiar with the show, and people are angry about it, they will always say, Samantha Bee said, and then in quotes, something that came out of my mouth. And it's like this, it's actually like a really tasty, like meta racism, where you're so racist, you can't even be mad at me you have to be mad at the woman in charge of me. So none of it ever comes to me. Like people will continue to yell at Sam for saying, like I did a piece that Sam wasn't in, and every single article was Samantha Bee says. Yeah.
You know what's kind of interesting is what Mike just brought up is that the most grief I've ever received is actually from the left. Yeah. So I did a piece on Bernie Bros in August. They came after me, and then not in a
their online presence isn't that much different sometimes than the
it was
than the troll presence.
It was incredibly aggressive, and but like not as bad as you think it might be. And then this latest piece with safe guns, where not really on social media, but on the comment section on our YouTube, someone was mentioning to me, they're like, oh, they didn't like the fact that you went after a
reading
Democrat.
The comments, were you?
No. Someone had said that. Yeah, you went. They thought you were unfair to her. I'm like, interesting. That only comes up when we go after our own people. I don't know. I don't know what that is. So that's the only time I've ever felt. But in terms of the right now, it's sort of like when we go to these rallies. What Mike was mentioning. These people, like these are the people that you would, if you were sick, you would phone them and say, I'm not feeling well. They would bring over 5 lasagnas immediately. But don't bring up anything to do with race, immigration, or healthcare.
We don't talk politics at my table unless there's an election going on. What about you, Mike? Have you had any incidents?
I get people respond very positively to the show and are very supportive. We love it. Great job. We love you're all of that stuff. And then I also get go die in a fire.
You get go die in a fire.
That sort of level.
Did someone say that to you?
It's more complicated, but it's like...
you're paraphrasing. That's pretty hard, paraphrasing.
It's more grammatically correct.
Yeah, they're hard to read, actually.
Like, bad form of dying, please experience that, is sort of the equation. However you can, whatever iteration of that. But I don't get a huge amount of that stuff. And yeah, mostly people are nice, like, hey, we like the show.
Did you find during the election, and everyone said that we had this sort of polarization where the left was so far on the left and the right was so far on the right. I personally disagree with that. But did you find during the election that everyone was so fired up that talking to Trump supporters sometimes could be similar to talking to Hillary supporters in terms of blinders that were put on about their candidate? So for the purpose of pushing forward that candidate's agenda or personality?
I think definitely in terms of fake news, that was the case. Like I got equally as much fake news from that I saw from Hillary supporters as from Trump supporters.
You did?
Oh yeah, and like people would post or it'd be on my Facebook wall, and I'm always the person who's like, hey, actually this isn't true, or this is what really happened, and people get so angry. But
there was that story, right, about Donald Trump on some talk show had apparently said that Republicans are the stupidest party, and if I were to run, I would run as a Republican, which I had heard really early in the campaign. I was running with that for months. And then literally like a week before the election, someone was like, that's not true. And I was like, oh, I've posted that on Facebook so many goddamn times. I gotta go delete all these.
Or like there was a story that the Pope had said something bad about Donald Trump. That one went really widely. It's believable, but just click.
I like that in fake news, the Pope both endorsed Donald Trump
and said
something bad about Donald Trump.
Because there was a segment that you guys did that was during debate watching with the right and with the left, and you had this really incredible moment where you had the Democrat arguing with the Republican, and they so quickly started talking over each other and just insulting each other personally. And actually, I found that the Democrat insulted the guy on the right personally much faster than the guy on the right, and it immediately pushed the guy on the right to be like, all right, I don't have to listen to you anymore. I don't have to hear anything that you're saying. You're basically saying that I don't speak in grammatically correct sentences. What did you think about that when that happened?
I could not believe it was unfolding in front of our eyes as we were shooting it.
Yeah, Mike actually produced that piece.
Yeah, and I was on the side of the guy who was I was at the Trump viewing party. And it was just like, I can't believe this is happening. Well, I could believe it was happening, but it just went off the rails.
So fast.
Yeah, it was like the whole, wow, that escalated quickly. It escalated really quickly.
We were just happy they weren't next to each other. Like they were on the phone.
Yeah.
You think it would have gotten violent if they were next to each other?
Yeah, and I'm not sure who would have punched who.
What is a story that you guys you're extremely excited to cover that you haven't been able to touch yet?
Anything that doesn't have to do with Donald Trump.
I don't know. I mean, there's so many. I gotta like when we have an amazing field department, and we have field meetings twice a week where we all get together and we pitch so many stories that we're passionate about, or and it's such a collaboration. If somebody else has a story, everyone jumps on it, and we honestly have so many stories that we could possibly shoot that are coming up that we won't get to them all for the reasons that we explained before, because they will be trumped by him. But yeah, we have. I don't know if there's anyone that jumps out right now. Well, you know what our head
secret.
is. Our head is so in our not the White House Correspondents dinner that's coming up on the 29th of April. It's like tunnel vision for that. We're all shooting for it. We're so focused
Talk about
on
this.
that.
What are you guys putting together for that?
We can't tell you.
Okay,
move on. Moving on.
It's really fascinating.
Really
Sorry.
Great promotion, guys. No.
There's gonna be really pretty dresses, and probably food.
Well, can we actually talk about it though to help promote it, or do you?
Yeah, we can.
We can talk about it in
we
that
can
annoying,
entice
teasy
you.
way.
Do that.
Oh my gosh, it's gonna be so great. It's just gonna be a really fun experience and with a lot of great people. And it really, I think the goal is to celebrate journalism, to celebrate the people on whose work we cannibalize and vandalize with fart jokes. Really, without them, we're nothing. So
Well, the original White House Correspondents' Dinner was supposed to be that, right? Celebrate journalism, and then it became a roast, and then just sort of like everybody shaking hands and saying hi. And
I mean, like, to be fair, they actually do that. We just don't watch it. Like, they do a whole thing before they turn the cameras on because nobody wants to watch this.
They give
like,
scholarships and everything as well, which apparently is what they're still going to do this year, even though the administration isn't going to attend. Before we get to the audience, I have to ask you guys, because I'm personally obsessed with the sort of famous members of the alt-right that have popped up. I think they're just the weirdest comical characters to ever really come out of politics, And the language that they've created for themselves, cuck, globalist, is so fascinating. What do you guys think of it? Like, what do you think of the Cernoviches and the Paul Joseph Watsons and the Alex Joneses and all those folks? Are they even worth making fun of, or are they doing it themselves?
My theory on all of that is like, it's so hard to make it as a comedian or an actor. It's just like, it's a really hard thing to do. And if all you want to do is be on television, just right now, if I were to sit here right now and just say some like batshit crazy right-wing stuff, I'd have a show on Fox in 5 minutes. And I think all those people are just people who want a camera to be pointed at them. And there's nothing wrong with that. They took the easiest route to get there. Congratulations, you're there. I don't know how much anyone else needs to pay attention to it. They're just, you know, Alex Jones is doing a bad stand-up routine. If only he would put in setups and punchlines, it would be better.
I think he thinks he does do that.
Also, bad is subjective. I mean, if it was a character that he was playing and it was an Andy Kaufman bit, it might actually be quite funny.
The most we talked about Alex Jones, though, was when he tweeted out a picture of himself for his birthday, and he's like, "It's my 43rd birthday." And we were all like, "He's 43? He's only 43?" That's the most impact he's had on us.
Hate is very drying to the skin. That's the problem. You have to
He needs to
moisturize.
moisturize
If you're
more.
going to hate that much, you have to moisturize
Oh,
more.
the hate lines.
I don't want to think about Alex Jones moisturizing.
You know, the alt-right and the administration has really co-opted this idea of fake news and what is fake news. How often do you find that gets applied to even what you guys do because it's comedy, where people call it fake news even though you're actually making very salient points, very smart points, and you're really saying what needs to be said?
Oh, even when we're out, like when people see the camera, they just yell, "Fake news!" And I'm like, you don't even know what this is. Like, for all you know, I'm doing a stand-up for CNN. Like, people are just very, I could do that, sir.
You heard that laugh and you're like, hey!
I mean, we've all had the experience of talking to people who are like, well, the mainstream media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and I've often started asking people, oh, do you regularly read the New York Times, the Washington Post? No, I mean, they're not reporting on this stuff. It's like, well, how do you know? Maybe you should read that.
Oh, my favorite is when you ask them, they go, "No, I get all my news from Breitbart."
Yeah.
You're like, "Oh, honey, I don't even know where to start."
Oh, sugar.
We got a lot of the fake news at the inauguration.
Yeah.
People were very smart. They were like, oh, okay, I'll talk to you. Talk to your fake news outlet. Fine.
My favorite is when people go, "Oh, you're gonna trick me into saying something stupid." I was like, I probably don't have to trick you.
Right, it was just gonna roll the camera.
Well, there was that great moment in one of your, I think it was like a deleted scene from one of your pieces where you're interviewing this girl and she immediately says something about, so it's a Black Lives Matter interview, I think, and she says something, you just sit there quietly, and she immediately talks herself into a ditch about police brutality.
That was the Debate Watchers, yeah. And she just, well, that's part of our job. It's not just telling jokes. It's like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna sit back and just wait this out. And sometimes too, like, and they'll stop speaking, and I'll keep staring at them, and they'll keep staring at me. I'm like, I'm not gonna speak first.
Well, it's so great because you essentially get her to admit that police should respect the Black community, and then she immediately, after saying that, goes, "You've tricked me. I got to get out of here. This is a biased interview."
Yeah. It's a really easy job. Just buy a cocktail when that happens.
Sometimes people start there. Like, I've literally like gone up to people and been like, "Okay, so we're gonna ask you a couple questions," and they'll just be like, "I hate Black Lives Matter." You're like, I haven't asked you a question yet.
But that's how most of our conversations start. That's what I.
So you would introduce yourself to someone, and they'd be,
Yeah, or like the craziest things that people have ever said that we choose not to show on the show. 90% of the time, they have offered that information. It is not in response to a question.
What is the craziest thing that's been said to you guys that you haven't put on the show? Since we're not throwing anyone under the bus, we're not seeing their face or anything. You have it right now.
I have one. It was that piece, and this woman said, you know what Black men need? They just need a role model. They need someone to look up to, like Bill Cosby. and it was just like, I don't even think we could use the clip because I think the producer was like, "Oh my God."
Did you ask her, this person, if they knew like what Bill Cosby had done, or?
I was just like, why do you it was when you're offered a gift like that, you just go deeper and go deeper, and then it just it becomes a piece that you can't use because then it becomes a piece about this woman knowing nothing. Like, what? That was by far the craziest thing, I think.
A lot of people at the RNC, again, would offer this information. We're not talking about immigration. Sort of out of the blue would be like, well, here's the deal with immigration. Those people are taking your jobs. like, if we didn't have so many immigrants here, then black people would get more jobs. And my response every time was like, I have a job. I'm doing it right now. I'm holding a microphone in your face. Why is this but that was like almost a talking point that they had come up with. Like the way they were gonna get black people interested in Trump was that he was gonna get rid of the immigrants and then we could have all the jobs that they do. Completely, I didn't ask a single question. Like multiple people offered that to me.
I mean, there's a constant stream of sort of crazy stuff that gets said. A lot of it is just sad. Some of it's just sad, and you're like, oh, we gotta stop doing it. I was talking to one woman, and she was like, well, usually this is the first time that I'm voting on my own. Usually, I just do what my husband tells me, and it broke me. And that was I said, okay, yeah, you can't use an interview like that.
How often do you guys find that you're broken by this a little bit?
Every time.
The inauguration was special, though, because we were trying to finish up quick so we didn't have to hear anyone speak. We were like, come on, let's just go to the van. We were
didn't want to hear about American carnage?
We didn't want to hear Mike Pence. We didn't hear we just wanted to run to the van and get to a restaurant, and which we did, and we all ordered 2 glasses of wine.
And then to be drinking during it.
We just needed, that was a hard day.
Yeah, we did an animation of me in a bathtub drinking like a Magnum bottle of wine. That was a recreation of the day of the inauguration.
I can vouch for you because
I left you to go get wine.
You left me to go get a giant bottle of wine.
Yeah,
and you told me you sat in a bathtub all night long. Yeah.
Let's turn it over to the audience for questions. Who has right here?
Hi, thanks so much for being here. I was wondering, I feel like in this political climate, we're all very tense when we talk to each other. And I think it's my first instinct to get defensive and defend my points. So how do you guys kind of check your opinions in order to provide like a comfortable environment for an interview?
On or off camera?
I think I try to approach every interview like I would a scene in an improv scene, because I'm an improviser. And so when you're improvising, your job is to come in, with a blank slate, respond to your partner, very deeply listen, not only to what they say, but to their body language and everything, and then to confirm for them, to yes and them. And I find that when you do that in an interview, you get really good stuff out of people, because we don't normally listen that deeply to each other. So it's like a new experience for them to be that deeply listened to by a stranger, and you get a lot of like more personal interaction quicker that way. And then also, because my job is to say yes, and to go where the interview is going, that kind of stops me, hopefully, from putting my opinion in, which would be saying no to where the conversation's going.
I think very few people actually have a chance, often have a chance to speak with someone and to tell their views to someone that they know disagrees with them and they want to talk about stuff. I think all of us are fascinated by people. I like talking to people and asking them questions. I want to hear what they have to say, even if it's kind of weird. I think that in the All Lives Matter piece, like for many of those people, they've been having dialogues in their minds for years with a black person of stuff that they wanted to say. If I talk to a black person, this is what I'll ask, or this is what I'll say. And this was their chance. And they got a chance to talk to someone who actually listened to them. For them, it was like a cathartic experience.
Yeah, some of them even said, like, I don't know, and oh my gosh, a lot of times people are physically shaking, and you can't not have compassion for that. And a lot of people were like, I don't even know how to say, what words should I use to have this conversation? Do I say black? Do I say African American? And it's like, wow, if you're there, we have so far to go before we can talk about Black Lives Matter, if you can't even say the word black comfortably. So, like, you can't really be too angry at that person who's trying so hard, and how unfortunate that their first chance to have that conversation happened on camera. But
it's also not fun to argue with people or yell at people or shout down their opinions. It's, as you said, it's much more fun and fascinating to listen and take it in.
We ruin the interview if we do that. We have to listen. I mean, there's only one time where I could think of where it was the end of a night where it was a rally for Trump, and I'd heard so many people give me excuses that, she was a woman, she can't do this because she's a woman, she was a woman. And this one man said, well, I don't know, she could get her period and she's gonna be emotional. And I was like, yeah, that's my period right now, and I wanna your head off. And it was like, that was the end of the night, but it was like a moment that had to be had. I mean, I didn't want to go into the explanation of like, I'm sure Hillary Clinton has moved on from that point in her life. And, I don't need to get into a biology lesson with you. But yeah, for the most part, we just have to focus and we have to listen and be understanding.
I think it's been said many times, you know, at the end of the night at a Trump rally, things went awry. Like, that's not like an uncommon phrase.
When the sun goes down, strange things happen.
One more question right here.
Hey, so there's a lot of talk in journalism on how to cover the news now in the new Trump era, or like how to change the way things are covered. I feel like Daily Show and Full Frontal kind of do a good job of making fun of like tweets which shouldn't be taken seriously. Has there been any changes in like your shows or the way you've had to cover the news since the Trump era?
Have all the conversations about covering the news differently or covering the Trump administration differently affected the way that you guys are covering it?
I don't think so, because I think we were always, the gift that we have that real journalists don't have is that we don't have to take that stuff serious. If stuff's stupid, it's just stupid. And I think it's hard when you're a journalist because you've been trained for your entire career that if the president says something, if the president says someone was tapping his phones, you better go investigate and make sure it wasn't really happening. Whereas we are allowed to just be like, nobody's tapping your damn phone, idiot. And they just, I mean, could you imagine if Anderson Cooper said that? It would be a problem, right? So that's why we exist.
Yeah, it's cathartic. I mean, we've gone through the stages of grief. Now we're coming out the other end, and we've been through them all. And you know, you can see that in the pattern of the show. And now we're just like, okay, you're still here? All right, we'll keep talking about you.
You know, Jon Stewart used to say during when he was doing the Daily Show that it was a comedy show first, and it wasn't a news show, but it was so often sort of lauded as something that was more news than it was comedy because he was able to tell the truth where cable news wasn't able to do that. Do you guys feel like you're doing that, or do you guys feel like you need to think first as a comedy show?
I mean, we're always trying to figure out, the easy part for us is unlike a regular, unlike regular journalism, we are free to say what we want. The challenge for us is how to tell serious stories, and every 15 seconds there's something funny, and that's really the hard thing. So it really is still just the balance of like, how do you tell a story, and how do you make it funny?
I will say, like, on a research level, we work with the same level of rigor as any news company would. Like, everything we say actually happened, it's well-sourced, all of that. But yeah, I think like the reason people watch the show is because it's a comedy show, so that has to come first. Like, we do a lot of, on the studio side, like a lot of historical stuff where we'll like go back and tell you the whole history of the evangelical movement or whatever. Like, nobody's voluntarily watching a TV show about the history of the evangelical movement unless it's really funny. So to me, the humor has to come first.
The history of the evangelical movement, to be honest with you.
We got you. We did 2 segments on it.
Whether it was funny or not, I think I would dig in and watch something like that. Guys, the show, it's one of the best shows on television. It's on Wednesday nights, right? At 10:30?
10:30.
10:30. Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. Thank you so much for being here, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.